All right. Hey, guys, it's Ken. We're trying something new here for the Substack. I appreciate everybody reading my book reviews. I've been trying to do a book review once every 5, 6 days or so. I've been a little lax the last month, but work comes into play. And I wanted to try something a little different here. I read a book by an author I have deeply admired over the years. I've gotten to know through correspondence. This is the first time we've ever talked, but we've talked on. We've had discussions via, I guess, dead tree correspondence through the mail, and also some occasional emails. And picked this book up at a particular time. Hit me pretty strongly, and I figured let me send him an email, see if he wants to come on and have a discussion about the book and a few other things related. So we got the founder of Deadspin, correspondent for MLB.com. He writes for about 17,000 different other outlets. Will, you pop up everywhere. I saw you popped up last week doing it was on. You talked about the ABS system recently.
For New York Magazine, yeah.
Right. You talked about curling during the Olympics,
yes.
which was fun. And, writes for the New York Times, Medium, Vulture, Washington Post. It is Will Leitch. Will, thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me. We are just a few days from my Illini in the Final Four, so you'll forgive me. I'm actually going on vacation to the Caribbean for a week with my family, and all I can think about is the Illini. So that's the kind of dad I am, apparently.
Before I forget, I have to ask you your thoughts on Bruce Pearl. What do you think about Bruce Pearl?
I have thoughts about Bruce Pearl. I actually wrote a piece for the Athletic about Bruce Pearl. It's funny because I was. It's so strange for any Illini fan. The backstory on Bruce Pearl is he made up a story about when he was in a recruiting battle with Illinois when he was assistant at Iowa over Deion Thomas. Mm-hmm. And he basically framed Thomas into saying something that he did not actually say, and then doctored the tapes, and was eventually blackballed from the coaching community for it. But it actually it still really hurt Illinois basketball for a long time. So when I was like 14 years old, all I knew was there was this terrible assistant at Iowa who would lie and cheat and do anything. But now he was gone, and we never have to deal with him again. He'd been banished from the sport, and then back as if the fish primordial ooze coming up from fish into people of the years of evolution. Bruce Pearl returned, and now he is amazingly after being banned by the sport multiple times, is the guy giving out my brackets on Selection Sunday, which is very strange.
We were living in Gainesville, Florida now for 27 years myself, and we have now Todd Golden, who is actually a former assistant for Bruce Pearl, and best buddies with Bruce's son, Stephen, who is now the coach at Auburn. So and Bruce has been in and out of the life of a Gator basketball fan over the last several years. So when I was thinking about Illinois basketball this week, besides bringing up Hoop Dreams, which I thought about prior to this podcast here, but I also thought about Bruce Pearl, so I had to get that out there. The reason I had you on today is, as I said, I've been trying to read a lot of books. I think you had a book club for one point, right, on one of your podcasts.
I had it was just an interview with authors. Yeah.
So I got I picked this book actually up at a library originally, actually on a Libby app, right? So I said, oh, you know what? I know Will wrote this book. Let me take a look at it, and it is called Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride. It came out last year, and
paperback in May.
Paperback in May. And is there a movie coming? Is that what I saw on Wikipedia? Or some sort of movie discussion?
They're working on. We sold it to Lionsgate. Lionsgate has hired a screenwriter, Scott Burns, the guy that wrote Contagion and The Informant. He is writing it right now, so I'm staying out of it because I don't know how to write screenplays, and I prefer to think the movies are performed in real time for me as I sit down and watch them. It's magic. So, but I'm out of the process, but I'm there if he needs me, though he probably doesn't.
I picked this book up because I had read your last book, How Lucky, which I think has some similar aspects to it, and the way I frame it is How Lucky, which is a book which takes place in Athens. It deals with somebody who has, he has muscular atrophy, right? The main character, Daniel.
Spinal muscular, SMA, yes. Spinal muscular atrophy.
Right. So it's a character, a protagonist that's in an unimaginable situation. So a situation that we choose not to think about us or somebody close to us having to deal with, right? And I saw some similarities just off the top when I started with Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride. So I thought about, all right, we have a character here in Lloyd McNeil who, while he's not dealing with he's dealing with a disease, but he's dealing with something on top of that, which is imminent death. And I think initially, did you realize when you were writing this book that were you developing on the themes of How Lucky when you decided for the concept of this book, Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride?
No, I would say that there's a surface similarity in that, like, my book in between is a book called The Time Has Come, and the thing that those books have in common, they all have clocks. And I like stories that have clocks where you can actually tell something like a normal scene, but it's wrought with tension because even if the character may not know that there's a clock, the reader does. And so I like the idea of clocks and putting putting characters in difficult situations where they have to do something quickly.
Would you say that your interest in clocks parallels your interest, say, in Richard Linklater movies? Where he's obsessed with time.
Right. Without question. And I think that one of the characters in The Time Has Come is a woman who she's a nurse now, but she was in the military, and so she leaves the United States to go serve on a base in Germany in 2014, and comes back to the United States in 2021, and a lot has changed in that time, and that is again a time span thing. I like the idea of time working differently for certain types of people, and Linklater is one of my favorite filmmakers, so I'm sure there's a similarity there. But yeah, I think with this, I would say theme-wise, Lloyd is more about fatherhood, and I think parenthood generally, and the idea of, I do think that we're living through a kind of tumultuous time, and I think that
you could say that, yeah.
I think that when I imagine, I always think, I watched Ken Burns' the Vietnam War documentary, the series when it came out a few years ago, and all I kept thinking the entire time was, wow, my parents were like 18, 19, 20 years old when all this was going on. My father served, my mother waited for him to come back, and so they went through all this, and then they tried to start a family, and they tried to live in the world, and the idea of, I now look back, and all I can think of is not these historical things, but what it must have felt like to live through that time, and what they want to pass on to me, what I would want to think that they were thinking during a stressful time. And so the idea of Lloyd, who is dying from glioblastoma, he's basically giving his last testament to his son. He's trying to. He obviously there's something that gets the plot going, and there's an actual activity. But the idea of him realizing, his son is 13 years old, and him realizing. He's not going to remember, he's going to be 26 someday, and he's not going to have anything to remember me by. I'm going to miss so much of his life. When you're 13, my son I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. They have the difference between them and 5 years from now is so profound that he also feels like this sense of loss, that he will not get to see who his son gets to turn into. So he wants to have this document where he not only says who he is, but also gives him advice for the things he's going to be going. And I found that was the driving part for Lloyd, for the book, was the idea of, how do I capture when I'm not there to help my kids? If I somehow am gone, how can I give them something to hopefully help them and let them know who I was?
Was there something, and not to get too personal, but there's something in your life going on, or was there an experience that you have with somebody close to you, or somebody you knew that was experiencing an issue with let's just say a brain condition, a tumor, something of the sort that Lloyd is dealing with, that inspired you for the idea for this book?
Yeah, there's actually a scene in the book where where Lloyd remembers as a kid going back to see his Aunt Marlise. And I went back to Mattoon, Illinois, which is where I'm from, right before the pandemic started. And one of my mom's best friends, and my parents now live out here in Georgia, but I was back in Illinois, and I went to go check on her because she was suffering from, she just got diagnosed with glioblastoma, and my mom had not had a chance to see her, and I was there, so I went to go check out on her. And it was, my uncle had previously died of glioblastoma, but I wasn't as close to, I was close to him, but I just wasn't there at the end. And so to see that vividly, and to see what that experience was like, and to be able to comfort her in some ways and not able to comfort her in other ways, and to see both the fear that she had, but also peace is not the right way to put it, but a certain kind of understanding and clarity that I saw from her. That was something that stuck with me, and so that was before that happened before I'd even written. But I think it was I'd written the first draft of How Lucky, so it was 2 books ago. So obviously it was something that stuck in my head a little bit, but it's not something it's something I always wanted, because that experience of having a very short amount of time. Glioblastoma is a horrible, horrible thing, and to have it and then know that you have a very short amount of time, and also to know that you're going to have issues with just cognition, and you're going to have there's going to be decline in a rapid amount of time, is obviously pretty. It was affecting to see both Marlise and my uncle go through it, and it was something obviously it stuck with me.
I mentioned to you before we're talking here about a personal experience I've had to go through with somebody dealing with a traumatic traumatic brain condition. Like Lloyd is dealing with, different, but having to deal with something of that sort. Where you're concerned as an author, you're writing a book, coming up with a concept. You want to get people to read this book, and you're dealing with a really, really, really shocking type of development right off the front with the main character. Is that a challenge for you to write a book that you know is going to eventually become very uplifting, but have to start it in a way which is so harsh?
I wanted it. One of the things I did with How Lucky as well, if you read How Lucky is, I almost didn't want to have a description on the back cover, because for the first 30 pages, obviously, Daniel has spinal muscular atrophy and he uses a wheelchair and he's severely disabled. But I didn't want the reader to know that until 30 pages in, because you should. One of the things that inspired me to write How Lucky was one of my son's best friends has spinal muscular atrophy, and they kind of grew up together. And Travis in that book is kind of almost my aspirational character for who my son turns out to be. And one of the things that he and many people at SMA would talk to me about was, it's really annoying that I can't just be a human for a half a second. I'm immediately someone with a disability, or someone that uses a wheelchair, or someone that's different. And so I wanted to establish the person as a person before you know about their circumstances. That's something that is definitely a similarity between both How Lucky and Lloyd McNeil, in that you should know, obviously you're there the second that Lloyd gets his diagnosis. That's how the book starts, when he gets his diagnosis. But I hopefully you're very firmly established in his voice and understanding who he is from the get-go, that's independent of the circumstances he's going through. And so the thing that I like about Lloyd and Daniel, and I would say I like about most of the characters in my novels, they're not extraordinary. They're actually not even normal people, but just regular people that were doing just fine and going out about their lives until this extraordinary circumstance fell upon them. I find that more interesting than extraordinary people, because I don't know a lot. Most of the extraordinary people most people that claim to be extraordinary are doing it more performatively or doing it in some sort of a show-offy way. I know a lot more interesting normal people that are just picking them up and setting them down every day. I think that's more dramatically compelling to establish who those people are and then have them go through the difficult circumstance, rather than show some special heart and soul that I think everybody deep down has.
One thing I neglected to ask you at the onset, as far as your last 3 books are fictional novels, you started out with your initial books. I have your first book, which you signed for me, Life's a Loser,
yeah.
which is a compilation, right? It's a compilation of essays I think you did for, was it a Black Table or prior?
Yeah, and there were some alternative weeklies. Yeah, it ran a lot of places.
Yeah, and then I believe God Save the Fan, which I read, that's a collection of sports essays, right? Correct?
They were original essays. Yeah, they were original essays. They weren't a collection. But Loser was a collection. That was original essays. Yes.
Okay, so those your initial forays into novels were nonfiction. Going into fiction over the last 3 novels. How did you transition? Was there a specific process change? How did you prepare to actually change your I guess focus into the fiction world as opposed to kind of what you were seemingly brought up in as far as the compilations? And I know you had a memoir in there also.
Well, for How Lucky, the nice thing about How Lucky, because I wrote How Lucky on spec. I didn't sell that. I didn't even tell my agent I was writing it. I really just got kind of obsessed with spinal muscular atrophy because of my son's friend, and just spent a lot of time talking to people. I was trying to figure out. I've been thinking about writing writing a novel, but I didn't want to sell it. I didn't want to pitch it. I just wanted to just write it on my own. So and so I didn't tell him until I had it done. And then I met my agent for dinner in New York with 200 pages, 300 pages printed out, like it was like the 70s. And I'm like, here it is. It's my only copy. I'm glad I didn't leave in the cab. The point is that I really just kind of trialed and errored. I've never taken a fiction writing class. I didn't go to McDowell. I have no MFA. I feel like the muscles are the same. I find my headspace, I like to maybe be in a little different headspace to write like a very dark scene from a novel than, say, writing a funny piece about baseball. But that I think this generally, it's storytelling, right? It's storytelling, and it's clear, hopefully concise, or at least straightforward. Explaining of a viewpoint and a connection with the reader. I think that's the same whether it's nonfiction or fiction. I actually find it sometimes easier to write fiction because I don't have to be me. It's really kind of nice. I don't think I'm particularly that interesting, so it's more fun to be somebody else. But the actual process and the actual language and the actual way I think about writing it, I'll have to say it is the same. I do write the novel stuff in a different place. I do like to physically go to a different place. I often I'll write at home. I work at home. I write at home in the mornings for generally journalism stuff for New York Magazine or MLB or The Athletic. But for writing the novel, I like to go to a different place. But that's really just to trick myself into thinking I'm doing something different when I'm really not actually doing anything all that different.
Does it make it more comfortable for you to set these novels in, I said, How Lucky takes place in Athens, Lloyd McNeil takes place in Atlanta? Does that make you more comfortable to kind of get your mind set straight to write these type of books?
Certainly when it came to How Lucky, I was writing from the perspective of someone that had a disability that I don't have. And so that required a ton of research and a ton of all the books, that's definitely the one where I relied on my journalism stuff the most, because I had to talk to so many people and so many people that both had SMA or dealt with SMA or a family member of someone with SMA. And so I just had to get all the details right. And then when I wrote it, I gave them the book and said, hey, tell me the stuff that I got wrong. And they did. They happily did so. And so the point is there was so much rigor involved in trying to make sure I got all the details right that when it came to putting in Athens, I'm like, you know what? I'm on such uncertain ground on everything else. I'll just make sure I got the streets right. So, literally, Daniel lives lives on my block, and just to make it as easy as possible for me, but because everything else had such a high level of difficulty.
One thing that stuck out with Lloyd McNeil is that he's dealing with the insurance industry. I deal with the insurance industry in my world as a lawyer. Did you talk to any lawyers about insurance denials in your preparation for this book?
I certainly made sure I had I wasn't wrong in my my general premise was wrong. We didn't get into actual contract language, but certainly I need to make sure that I'm not crazy. And for me, that actually the even more helpful thing was talking to police officers and talking specifically to people that were involved with the police, with the union or the Benevolent Association, or to just generally get an understanding of, wait, so is this a real thing? And it is. It is actually a real thing that if they, because the purpose of the book is if they die in the line of duty, their family does get more. It's not used very often, but that obviously what was the idea. And it was interesting too, because to discover as you do kind of more research, being a policeman is obviously it's a dangerous job. It's much more dangerous than sitting here and typing all day than I'm doing. But when it comes to actual deaths on the job, they're incredibly rare, and they're incredibly rare, and to the point where they've even sometimes expanded the definition. For a while, there was a big debate in the insurance community and the union community about whether or not if you developed COVID on the job and died from it, whether that counted as dying from being a police officer. It was a big debate for a long period of time. So that was really interesting. My interest as a storyteller, I'll confess, my interest in the semantics of the law is enough to make it believable, but probably no more than that. This is why I could not be Andy Weir. And I could not write a cool science fiction novel, because at a certain level, I just want enough to be able to tell the story. I don't actually care about the science that much. So get enough to where no one will read it and be like, "That's complete crap," but not so much that I get lost down the rabbit hole.
I still have to see that movie. I have not seen it yet. Would you recommend it?
I think it's good. I like The Martian more. I would say I like The Martian more. Yeah.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. As far as you mentioned, doing research regarding police departments. Obviously, police departments over the last several years under a lot of scrutiny. Is it safe to say that Lloyd McNeil is a challenging cop to write as a character? Because I read the character as, for lack of a better way of putting it, he's almost like a woke cop, right? He's very sensitive. He's sensitive to a lot of the issues surrounding the profession, especially recently. Did you have that in mind when you crafted his character and the way he approached his profession?
Actually, I felt kind of, I was almost accidentally woke in that regard, in that, like, because one of the things I imagined about Lloyd, really from the get-go of the character, is, his father was this very problematic police chief throughout Atlanta who was certainly successful and was certainly very powerful. But, Lloyd kind of became a cop before he really even knew that he wanted to be a cop. It was just something that he was expected to do. And he kind of learns not only through kind of his fraught relationship with his father, but also just kind of from his own personality, what he values and what he cares about. And one of the things he kind of learns about himself is that, like, I understand what my father was doing as a cop, but I actually don't agree. And I think part of that can't help but be, and part of that's rational and part of that's his mindset and who he is, but also that there is a psychological aspect to it, right? I think in a lot of ways all of us are trying to either relive our parents' lives or relitigate them. And I think that, like, Lloyd, by virtue of who Lloyd is and who his father was, he's kind of come to, I wouldn't say woke, but I would say a more modern view of policing that, frankly, I think is more common and was more common, frankly, even before 2020. I think that, if you look at, like, some of, obviously, that reckoning that we're still going through it was, I think, long overdue. But also the idea that, but I think institutionally, a lot of those reforms, a lot of these big city reforms had attempted, not always successfully, but had certainly attempted to try to put some of those reforms into place. Lloyd is very much of that school. He may believe them more, he may smirk at them less than perhaps some of his colleagues do, but I do think he's coming at them from a psychologically honest place.
That's I read it, and I hate the term woke because I think it's been bastardized over the last several months, several years. But I think you really did a really effective job as far as just talking, establishing the politics of a typical police department. I think were really effectively worked out, and clearly I could read that, knowing police officers, knowing LEOs. You did a very, very strong job at kind of dealing with how those things work in reality, and a lot of the day-to-day, a lot of the mundane stuff, but a lot of the day-to-day decisions they have to deal with. So I thought that was extremely effective.
Yeah, but one of the fun things about that was, let me honestly, like, I did more research for How Lucky just because I had to talk to so many people about with SMA, but like, and I did a lot of research for The Time Has Come too, because there's like a bouncer that works at a music venue and there's people working in a hospital. But the thing that was fun about this was that, like, when I talked to cops for the book, I didn't want to hear about the exciting things that happened. I wanted to know, like, the dull stuff, the boring stuff, the how you keep your days, how you interact with people in the office. That was much more interesting to me, and hopefully that comes across in the book.
So it's Lloyd McNeil's Last Ride. It is a really, really great book. It's not a long read. I would suggest anybody that's watching this take a moment, buy the book. It's a really. Is there anything else coming up, Will, as far as the next novel?
Yeah, we're actually. I'm thinking we are about to. I can't get into details about it yet, but we are about to nail what the next book is going to be. I will say, well, maybe we'll get into this next, but I've been writing. I found during these tumultuous times that in a lot of ways, for a long time, writing that. One of my favorite things about Selling How Lucky was the guy that bought it from HarperCollins had no idea I was a sports writer. He was not a sports fan and had no idea I was a sports writer at all. So it was very exciting because I feel like I'd like proven myself in this whole different like realm. No, he wasn't buying because he's like, oh, he'll help it. His sports fans will read it. He had no idea I even wrote sports books. Wrote about sports at all.
Right.
The idea of writing a sports book is something I've thought about doing, and we may that may be something that's happening down the line. But I will always be writing novels for as long as they let me.
So you're going to become a new Matt Christopher. I don't know if you've read his books when we were
Oh
kids.
The kid that batted 1,000. That was the one I always remembered. Yes, the one because he walked all the time. He fouled all the pitches off. Right.
Those books. I think I wore those books out of the library. Those are the Choose Your Own Adventure books back in the day. So I have 5 questions I want to ask you to wrap this up. If you have a moment, just basically random stuff and stuff I've always wanted to bring up with you. And if I ever have you on next, other than a book, I wouldn't mind doing a half hour when the new episode of the Up series is released. You were the person that got me into that.
Michael Apted, of course.
The new edition is coming out, I think, at the end of this year. I was reading through ITV with a new director, right? Because I think the original director passed away. Yeah. So looking forward to that. So first question. As a fellow Big Ten grad, mid-'90s, height of the Big Ten, and I know you consider Penn State, you will consider a Big Ten school still, right? As an original Big Ten alum. As
definitely more than UCLA.
Yes. We both live now in an SEC, big town, Georgia, Florida, Gainesville, Athens. What's one thing an SEC person will never understand about Big Ten culture, and vice versa, a Big Ten person will not understand about SEC culture?
I think that a Big Ten person will never really quite understand that everyone in the SEC is like, every school in the SEC is like Michigan when they went absolutely crazy to win the national championship, and like through the whole I'm a Michigan honorable man out the window, and now there's this sense of, well, Michigan's got to get back to who they are. The SEC has no pretense about any of that. They're just trying to win, and it is institutionally like, I live in Athens, and like there are. Like Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, is from Athens, and he will. It's hard to find a time where he doesn't have a dog's logo somewhere around him. It's like the cheapest heat possible. That's that connection is in the SEC. You cannot separate politics, Southern politics, and football, college football. Right here, they're the same thing. So, and that I think there's a level of intensity that, as a Big Ten fan, I know Michigan, Ohio State fans are obviously very crazy. Penn State's very crazy, but like. It's embedded into the culture of everything here in a way that I don't know if necessarily is true in the Big Ten. As from SEC for the Big Ten, I would say that we are much more normal tailgaters. We just go out, just grill things and eat, and then go into the game. It's not a whole production. Nobody wears a suit. No one puts a bell dress on. It's just like a normal thing, like any normal tailgate.
Okay, question 2. Is Hoop Dreams the greatest sports doc ever produced? And if not, what is?
It is. I think we actually, my colleague Tim Grierson and I, who we do the Grierson Leitch podcast, we actually did Vulture's best sports movies of all time, and Hoop Dreams is number 1. I think Hoop Dreams, sports or documentary, otherwise it is. And obviously being from Illinois, that is, and growing up as a hero, with kind of having Roger Ebert as my hero, Hoop Dreams is particularly personal and vivid in that way. And so, I think that Hoop Dreams, to me, it's funny because Tim, one of our best movies this last year was My Undesirable Friends, which is that 5-hour documentary about the last independent television station in Russia. And watching that movie, it's an incredible movie, and it really was the first movie in a long time that really felt like it had, to us, that epic Hoop Dreams feel, that it captures this specific story, but it also captures everything in the world. And Hoop Dreams to me that's an inner circle movie right there.
I have nothing to debate there. I agree with you totally. You mentioned Grierson. I want to recommend your podcast with Tim Grierson is phenomenal. I will admit, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, I actually don't listen to the episodes when they come out. Mm-hmm. I wait often to watch the movies and then fast forward. Mm-hmm. Don't be offended. I sometimes fast forward. No. You're kind of back and forth.
You can AI chapter those now.
And I don't like to listen to the reviews prior to watching the movie. I love listening to it after the fact. And it's a great way, because generally everything that's been, you have rewatchables now. That's a Simmons thing. It's all generally a certain genre. Generally, every major movie that's come out in the last several years, you guys have a review, and it's very well organized, and it's a great way to kind of like catalog reviews and also remember films that you really enjoyed after the fact or didn't enjoy, and see if these guys agree or not agree with you. you did an extended bonus riff on weapons last year with Tim. I have not seen that movie yet, so I've yet to watch it. All I know is Amy Madigan wins the Oscar for Best Supporting. Why should everybody see Weapons, and why is this movie so particularly interesting for somebody that hasn't seen it?
Weapons. It's funny because like it is. I know it's ostensibly a horror film, but I don't think people should think of it that way. Particularly if you're a fan of. It's a very fascinating combination of almost an old grim fairy tale and like a 90s Tarantino intermixing storylines, while also with this overarching notion of what it feels like to raise kids in the world now, and that general sense of a lack of safety for your children, and that I think we all kind of weirdly feel during those times, while also being ridiculously entertaining. And I would argue this gets lost a lot when people talk about Weapons. It's extremely funny. It's a very, very funny movie. The guy that did Zach Kreger used to be on the Whitest Kids You Know sketch show. He was like one of the guys on that show, and he is very, very funny, and the movie is very, very funny. If you saw Barbarian, that was his previous movie. That was a great test run for Weapons. I legitimately think Weapons is a full-on great movie, like capital G, capital M. I think it's a truly, truly great movie. So to see all the love that it got, to see the idea of that movie winning an Oscar, people are like, wow, a horror movie won an Oscar? Like, that movie is so much more than just a horror movie. I think it's truly great.
Awesome. Now that's a ringing endorsement. I look forward to seeing it. Going back to Deadspin, and this might be a tough one. Was there one piece that was written at Deadspin which stands out to you above all others, or was there a few? When you think of the quintessential Deadspin piece of writing, what would you put out there?
Honestly, I always feel bad about this because I feel like one of my favorite pieces ever was actually literally something we did on launch day that nobody ever ended up seeing because it was my big piece I'd built up for launch day in September 2005, which was I found one of those speaker services things where you found out how much people got paid, like how much Chris Berman would get paid to go talk to like a group of insurance salesmen or a group of at some sort of conference. And it was a very, I don't think people had quite thought about that in 2005. The idea that like, no, the people on your television that they're on SportsCenter or on Cold Pizza or whatever the shows were at the time, they're celebrities just like the athletes are. The thing I used to always say at the time, because people would be like, why do you report on the media so much at Deadspin? I'm like, who do you know? The backup shortstop for the Marlins or Chris Berman? Like, tell me more as a sports fan who you know better. And so for me, like, if you were covering sports, you covered the media the same way that you cover. And now that seems obvious. Like, more people know who Stephen A. Smith is than unfortunately, than most athletes. Now we all just kind of understand. But at the time, there really was this notion of, oh, well, the people that work in sports are over here, and the people that consume all this stuff are over here, and never the twain shall meet. And that always struck me as insane. And now that line doesn't exist anymore. I think it probably would have gotten rid of it anyway without Deadspin. But certainly when I think about the stuff that I was trying to do it, but also in like a funny way. Like, it wasn't a look at these pricks, right? Like, it was supposed to be like this kind of idea of like, they are celebrities. They're people just, and they're dopes just like you. So that was Deadspin was a fun time. You know, it will be 18 years this summer since I left Deadspin. It is literally, my time away from Deadspin is as old as like a point guard in the Final Four this year. It's absolutely insane.
I remember the one person I talked to at Deadspin back in the day through private message, I don't know if it was it might have been through AOL IM, was AJ. Because AJ went to the school he went to this Council Rock High School, which is a huge school in the Philadelphia area. He went to the adjacent high school when the time was there. So we kind of started a conversation.
And he went to LaSalle. He went to LaSalle, too, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, LaSalle. You mentioned, though, about the original Deadspin piece. I'll never forget when the Eagles won the Super Bowl last year. You know how sometimes the other local sports teams will do a little poster and they'll say, congratulations to the Eagles from the Phillies. So they show a picture of the Fanatic, and on the bottom they have random Eagles players, you know, in a kind of a montage. And who's the Fanatic standing to? Is he standing next to Nick Sirianni? Is he standing next to, you know, A.J. Brown or Jalen Hurts? No, he's standing next to Big Dom, right? So Big Dom is a bigger star. in many people than a lot of the players. So that's
yes. And of course, the late great Dan McQuaid too was a big defector Deadspin person, and obviously a big part of the Philly experience.
If you don't mind saying, Dan McQuaid went to Holy Ghost High School. He was a little younger than I was, but he did a piece on a local mall which died, for lack of a better term to use it, God bless him, but last year, and it was amazing. I read that piece, and the way his evocative way of describing it, of a place where I went maybe 150 times when I was a teenager, and he walked through it. It was one of the most incredible pieces of writing I've seen, and
Dan was amazing.
Really, really, it's amazing.
Dan was absolutely amazing.
Yeah. One final question: if you could recommend a book for a book club, I have a book club. We have a great thing going. We have about 10 people that meet every month, have drinks, eat, talk about a book for an hour. Everybody actually reads it. Do you have a suggestion that you would throw out there? It's not one of your books.
I have a billion suggestions, but I'm just going to go with the book I'm currently reading. And so I'm reading a book about Jonestown, and I find it absolutely. It's a nonfiction book, but it's a book about Jonestown. I don't have it with me, or I would give you the name of it and the author. Maybe you can toss it up in the thing. But it is it's a comprehensive. I'm going to look up the name of it right now so I can get it correctly. It is The Road to Jonestown: Jim Jones and People's Temple by Jeff Green, and it is. Obviously, it's about Jonestown and all that built up to it. Because, a lot of people that just knew the TV movie when they were a kid or have thought of Jonestown, or just, now it's just like a Kool-Aid joke anymore. Like, you forget that, this was like a real church that, built, and, what happened and how it went to Guyana and how this stuff happened. The way that built and grew and expanded, and the way its followers followed it, will feel very evocative to a lot of things that are going on right now. That's one of the things that really struck me reading that as I'm reading this book right now is there's a lot of times I find the way that they react to him, and the way that that his people in that church that was quite large and had a whole community, the way they would react to things that were wrong or things that disagreed with their worldview will strike many people as very familiar to things that we are going through right now. So that I reckon that is a fascinating book. I don't know anyone else has read it, so the idea of doing it in a book club and be able to talk about it with someone else, because I really want to talk about it with someone, because it's absolutely fascinating.
That's the Jim Jones stuff is fascinating. I don't know if you read the San Francisco. There was a history of San Francisco book from the It's basically a 1900s history of San Francisco. I can't think of the name of it. It's unbelievable book. Anyway, I'll email it to you. But it goes through that whole history. Jim Jones being a part of all the craziness that happened. Yeah. Right, Haight-Ashbury and everything. So
he's from Indiana, and then he went to San Francisco, and then it's absolutely wild. It's absolutely wild.
And it goes to show you how people can the power of cults, what people are capable of under the certain power that certain people can have over certain people. So that's a great recommendation, Will. So anyway, I know you got to pick your kids up, so I thank you. Hopefully, we can have you on again someday to talk maybe about another book or something else. And it's great having you on.
Please, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I'll do it again when they let me write another one, which is hopefully soon.
Okay. Thanks, Will.
Of course.
Go Illinois.